when I look back at everything as a whole, the complexion of the work hasn't really changed. You know, I think the underlying function of my work is really about drawing. It's just drawing and developing a vocabulary of marks and that sort of thing. Initially, when I first realized that I had some abilities, I would work to be able to, I don't know how to put this, transform my whole mindset about everything I would come in contact with. And what I realized over the years was, you know, I'm solving all these problems that I believe I have in understanding the world around me. And in doing so, the majority of time, I could not come up with an answer. Religion has always been a big part of my learning. It's not limited to any specific religious study, but I think that in a lot of ways, art is a monastic practice in general, and it's really an outlet for me.
Were there any pivotal points looking back at your career?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of them. I mean, when I was a kid, I was the most restless kid in my household. I had 2 sisters and a brother that I drove crazy, as well as my mother and father. And, you know, how do you take the chaos kid out of an equation where everything seems to be, you know, in harmony? I was not that kid. I mean, I was always put into corner. You know, I couldn't leave my hands off my brother or my sister. I had to, you know, mess with them. And so as a result, the pendulum that I was swinging on as a kid was being disciplined. I'd get out of control. They'd bring me back under control. In doing so, I recall my primary development as a child was in being disciplined. I was placed on a couch in the living room that was off limits to children. And in that living room was the Book of Knowledge Encyclopedia and the Time Life Art Series books. And I would pick one of these books and sit down and open it, and my imagination would go crazy. And for some reason that calmed me down. I could re-enter the family. Later in life, I because I was so out of control, I ended up going into the military, wised up, learned a lot real quick. And when I got out of the military, the Navy, I went to school. So I took some art history classes, and then I loaded up on art history classes. And then I got a major, and my art history major. And then I took a painting for non-majors class. So I ended up kind of meandering out of the history into the studio, and spent a little bit more time as an undergraduate. But while I was there, there were 2 people, a professor named Harvey Breverman. He was the printmaking professor, one of them. And then the other person was a student by the name of Martin Beck. And he and I became really, really, really close in proximity, age, studio space, academically, intellectually challenged each other. And so that was probably what propelled me into continuing with my education.
What first sparked your interest in printmaking and just the world of printmaking?
It was Harvey Breverman. It was the professor. What that did for me was to see his own work, his demonstrations, and follow his suggestion. And what it did for me was really expanded my visual vocabulary, my intellectual understanding of how to create imagery, um, all the principles of design, all the fundamentals became critical in assessing the work I was doing, and also the freedom that I found in that exploration. And primarily etching was the first class and beginning. And I learned how to use a wide range of tools I never used before. I love to use razor blades to draw. You could draw in metal. You had to put a ground on the plate. You had to imagine what it would look like in mirror image. You had to deal with dyslexia. You had to allow the process to sort of arrive at a state that you weren't quite familiar with, or that might not meet an expectation. So that was extraordinary change for me, because I was always drawing on paper. I was always painting with a brush, doing other kinds of hand manipulated things, and the tool changed all that. The print shop changed it.
Are there any external events or experiences, such as environmental or political, that have affected your work outside of religion?
Oh yeah, two things that I can think of. The AIDS epidemic. When I was undergrad, I was leaving school in the mid to late '80s, well, mid '80s, and there was so much concern. And I'm not a political person. I avoid it because it just doesn't allow me to think the way I like to think, and it kind of gets in my way. But there was so many things going on at the time, and in the art world, the day without art became a crucial, pivotal point. And that was a day, I think it was December 1st, 1985, or something like this, maybe 86, where the galleries and museums decided to close their doors and cover them up with black sheets, and then go and cover advertisements and all of these things in the public space to bring attention to what it would be like without living without. And in turn, the art community and the theater community and those communities were greatly affected at that time. So that was a big deal for me. And then second was after I was teaching in the '90s was Hurricane Katrina, because it was something coming that everyone knew was coming. And I guess I had the luxury of being a college professor at the time and could glue myself to this event, which I did 24 hours a day on the 24-hour news networks and public radio. And, it just, I lost sleep, for days. And as a result, my response a month or two later, after learning about the devastation and displacement and people and, all these tragedies, I created a body of work that probably went on for maybe 2 or 3 years.
Peter, you're talking about a variety of interactions with people, whether it's your colleague in school or your professor or your students, and we've talked to other printmakers who really talk about the collaborative nature potentially of the studio, the printmaking studio. Do you feel like that was a reason why you were drawn to printmaking, because it offered more social dynamics with people?
Absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, it's far more difficult to go into a print shop at midnight by yourself than it is with another person. And there are some rules, right? The thing about printmaking is that you have to consider other people, because everyone's using the equipment. And if you're selfish, if you're obstinate, if you are a slob, if you are messy, these things are pointed out with no hesitation. And so I think that, that respect for space and other people in a print shop has everything to do with this idea that it's really about sharing something. It could be sharing ideas, or it could be sharing tools and equipment. And by doing so, you learn how everyone uses these things, and your understanding for, I hate to use the word technique, but the technologies move in a very rapid way when you can observe and then respond. It's a great way to learn. The other thing about collaboration that I learned by being a printmaker is that there really are no secrets. Trade secrets, cabinet making, food industry, I don't know about recipes, but in the print shop, if you don't follow certain recipes or understand them, you can't manipulate them. And that is a shared thing. Everyone has a hand in the process. And I think that's a big underlying factor in how we develop and learn.
It's so fascinating that you said that, because Andy Owen, who's the professor here in printmaking, as you know, he worked with Harvey Littleton, and
oh yeah,
and one of the comments or sayings that Harvey Littleton based his print shop on was no secrets, and that was a strong statement that he wanted everyone that worked in his studio to understand, was that this was an opportunity to share and to learn and to advance everyone's skills and ideas and technologies. So it's funny that you came to the same conclusion with the same language.
Well, I can't credit myself for that, because the printmaking community is so tight. And once you experience an event in that space with other people, those traditions are passed on.
Being a printmaker and a collector, could you describe what print exchanges are and their importance?
Well, yeah, it's the carrot. A collaborative portfolio, or a coalition of people that are focusing on a common theme. You realize how many different approaches there are.
To me, that's what's so fascinating about that portfolio, is that, or those portfolios, that it's up to the artist to figure out what each year, how to pick something that is meaningful to them out of each year, and then how to communicate that. And there's such infinite ways to understand our history, and I think lately, we're in the midst of this political divide on, what do we remember, what do we, turn our back, away from, or face away from, what do we celebrate, what do we acknowledge. And so it's a complex portfolio.
Yeah.
It really, contextualizes so many of these questions and ideas.
Yeah, and there are a number of artists in those portfolios that are involved in academics, involved in doing research, You know, when you asked me about an inspiring quote, I used to tell my students all the time, you have to have a RAP, RAP, and it's an acronym for Research Awareness Process. And that research is required, and people forget that artist research. You know, if you're going to involve or engage yourself in doing something, that portfolio, those are the USA History of America, you've got 50 different people projecting on a particular year some aspect of their research and their understanding. And sometimes it's very literal, but sometimes it's also somewhat, you know, profound. And I think that, you know, having that and becoming aware, the awareness part, it really helps you, you know, act on something. And the process, of course, is, you know, we all process information differently. You know, we all go at it in our own way.
Could you address your role in the FGCU's permanent collection?
I've been carrying this stuff around with me for years, and my life has changed and shifted. And I, when my father passed away, who was also a practicing artist, I had to destroy and throw away so many things that he had created, and it brought tears to my eyes. And so I don't want to leave this to my son. I don't know what he would do with it, but I don't want him to have to experience something I experienced. And it wasn't the first time my father, it was also the woman whose job I took after she retired, when she passed away. And it was when Joe Jablonski passed away. And then other friends that passed away whose families I helped. I know it's difficult to find those that are willing to accept something like this. And for that, I'm truly grateful, because that is a burden that you guys have lifted from me personally. It doesn't get any better than seeing the real thing in the real time in a space that's environmentally safe, that's intimate enough to give you that pleasure. And that pleasure is holding this thing and looking at it. The only way I could learn was by going somewhere and actually saying, you have a print collection, is there any way I can look at it?
Looking at, like you say, looking at physical objects, how are they made? How do you present them? How do you preserve them? How do you learn about and communicate what they're offering? You know, that's a rich trove for our students and our community to, you know, to get invested in. And so thank you for that gift to us.
Thanks so much for having me. It was fun.
It was fun. Thank you.